So I just finished The Maidens by Michaelides, and I didn't like it. I feel a bit duped because this book is riding the coattails of the dark academia subgenre, and it's definitely feeding off of the hype that those books get, while actually not being one of those books. It's instead like a detective thriller, but because it takes place at an elite school and there's a murder, the way it's marketed, the way it's talked about, I went into it thinking, oh, this is a dark academia book. And it's not at all. And I think it's a bit deceptive in that sense. I also didn't realise that it was the same writer as The Silent Patient, because I'm not familiar with this writer, but I am familiar with The Silent Patient. That book's reputation precedes itself. So going into it, there was a lot of cognitive bias. I was like, oh no, this is going to be terrible. And I suppose for me, the frustrating thing was the bones of this story had potential. If a better writer took this concept, it could have been something worth reading. But because it's written in such a basic way, like, I'm sad to say it, but it's very basic. And that's not always a bad thing, because there is obviously a place for basic writing. Basic writing is more marketable, more palatable, especially in this genre. Like, this is the perfect book to find in an airport bargain bin, read on the plane, and then maybe read on the Mediterranean. You know, you're on the Amalfi Coast with your limoncello, you want to read some cheap thrills, sure, have at it. But if you're looking for a book that is thoughtful, a book that is edifying, as a lot of dark academia books are, maybe look elsewhere. I suppose the easiest way to put it would just be to say that the vibes were off. We were hoping for gothic, esoteric. We just got basic. We just got basic. The descriptive writing, especially in this book, was so cringe-inducing. I understand that this writer studied at Cambridge, has a lot of admiration for the school, but so many chapters would just start with, and then we went to this location in Cambridge. This location, you know, is known for this, and I went here when I studied, yada, yada, yada. Like, it felt like some sort of tourist pamphlet. It was very strange, this weird, like, positive echo chamber. It became like a Cambridge circle jerk, because the writer went to Cambridge, the main character formerly went to Cambridge, but was also visiting their niece who is currently studying at Cambridge. The victims were also in Cambridge. There were multiple references to Tennyson, Alfred Lord Tennyson, the poet laureate, who went to Cambridge. And it was just this very weird, obsessive, like, it didn't evolve or take the discussion about Cambridge to anything interesting. Like, if I compare this to Babel by R.F. Kuang, that book so beautifully manages to celebrate Oxford while also acknowledging that, yes, a lot of the decadence of Oxford is as a result of colonialism and exploitation, and only a small minority of people actually get to enjoy all of this luxury. So the conversation feels a bit more balanced. This book was just like, no, Cambridge, isn't it amazing? Ooh, nature, let's go eat and drink. And it was so one note. The main character is also a psychotherapist, so there was an awful lot of, let's get real deep into what this person's thinking. Oh, maybe this person is acting this way because of their childhood. Ooh, how deep, how analytical. It's like, oh. Like, I wish, maybe I should do like a live stream where you actually see my reaction as I'm reading a book, because this one would have been a sight. I need to get like my oculomotor nerves tested, the sheer volume of times that I eye rolled while reading this. It bears no comparison. I can't think of another book where I would just be like, oh, what is this? What am I reading? I'll try to say this in a way that doesn't spoil the twist ending, but the ending is so bizarrely crafted from like a story making POV, because so much of what had been building and had been developed in the world of the story was just discarded. Like, so much time was wasted getting to know certain bits of this puzzle, only for them to be completely irrelevant to the final solution. And so when we got there, it was like, oh, well, you just pulled that out of your ass. You didn't keep a story Bible. You didn't know what you were doing. The organisation of this book must have been headache inducing. I don't know this writer's process, but I would not want to be a fly on the wall having to see them piece this together, because it felt like they did steps 1 through to 8. Then when they got to step 9, they like pulled out the first 8 steps and said, this is the new way it's going to go. And we're just sitting there like, huh? Oh, okay. And while the book is giving us this very surface level psychoanalysis on these fictional characters, it's also trying to make us think a certain way. And if you've read, like, I want to say upwards of 10 books in your lifetime, you don't fall for its weird subterfuge. Like, everyone is so confident that the murderer is a man, even though there's no evidence to base that off of. And so us reading it, we're just like, oh, so it's a woman then. You know, that's not clever. Okay, we weren't born yesterday. We understand how the detective thriller works. You're so badly wanting me to believe that it's a male killer, so I know it's a female. Oh, you're going to introduce this stuffed toy and then never bring it up again. Oh, that's because there's going to be a piece of damning evidence in that stuffed toy that is revealed in the final act. Oh, what? Like, come on. We know how to Chekhov gun, like, please. And I think that was what frustrated me about the epilogue as well, because this writer was like, oh, here's a list of all of these famous classic female crime writers that I love to read about, you know, when I was growing up. And it's like, yes, but these writers, the stories that they made were watertight. Like, if you look at your average Agatha Christie novel, every single minute detail has been thought about. This book, you couldn't have a discussion about it because you would just upset yourself and you would upset other people trying to pick apart all of the strands that go nowhere, all of the B plots that have nothing to do with anything. Like, this book has a full romantic comedy side plot going on where, like, Mariana, she's the main girl, by the way, it's fine, no one cares. Her and this other guy called Fred, he keeps like hitting on her and she keeps telling him no. It's like, oh, hard to get. And like at the end they don't end up together, and it also has nothing to do with the case. So it was like, what's the point of all of this? Oh, and can we say the guy who keeps hitting on her, she keeps telling him, no, you're too young for me, you're too young for me, you're like a child. He's 29, she's 36. Am I crazy? 7-year age gap. That's nothing. She was making it sound like, if you read the way she was describing this situation, she made it sound like he was 19 and she was pushing 50. It's like, you're both sexually active. There's a 7-year age gap. I think there's some other reason you're not into him, because you saying he's a child when he's late 20s, you're mid 30s. What are we doing? The ending also has some very insensitive tropes about step-parents and abuse, because of course if you're a stepfather you just have to be like an abusive piece of shit, and if you are a former abuse victim you have to go out and find a man who is just as terrible as your father. It was just stuff like that. I was like, oh, okay. Was this book written 20 years ago? Yeah, if you weren't convinced already, this is a total skip. It is a no from me.